All right, I'm live. Good evening, everybody. This is Tim. Welcome to another episode of A Little Bit of Everything. It's good to see that there are some people here. Uh, I hope all of you are doing well. It is a wonderful Friday evening here for me in Arizona. Um, it's been a couple of days since I've been on. As a matter of fact, I really haven't been on for much of this week. It's been fairly active for me. Um, hey, who dat pops in says, "Hi, brother. Good to see you and all." Yes, sir. It's good to see you again too. It's been a few days, and just a lot going on. Basically, um, I had a meeting with some people earlier this week that was kind of revealing to me about human behavior, and just to see that being expressed by grown men was somewhat disheartening, but not surprising, unfortunately. So that weighed on me quite a bit. That was Tuesday evening. And Wednesday, after volunteering at the food bank, I proceeded to make a video, a recording of a slide presentation that I made before a group of people recently about the subject of chronology. So I made that, and that was Wednesday evening. And then last night, it took like 2 hours or more to upload. It's presently it's publicly accessible, but it's not publicly displayed at the moment. So it's one of those things that if somebody's really interested in it, they can ask me for the URL that will take them to it. Um, like I said, it's basically a study of chronology and the history of the world based on the biblical account of world history. So did that, and then today um, I was out working on my property as I normally would, and it was nice to be able to uh, get some things done, like fully completed. I recently finished putting all of my excess dirt away into a permanent home rather than just have it be piled there. And I also finished putting a layer of rock in the second drainage ditch that I started. So those things were all done, and the plumber was out there the other day, and he spray painted the lines on the foundation fill dirt of where the water and drainage lines are going to go. And excuse me, my excavator was out there today and dug those ditches for him. So it's nice to just see things coming along. And tomorrow evening, I will be visiting with the man I've spoken about before, who's the dump truck driver who is interested in getting into the pulse chain system. So I'll be visiting him tomorrow evening. I don't know if I'm going to have time tomorrow to be online, but it's good to be here this evening. If the people that are watching are acquainted with my live streams, I make a big deal on Saturdays about the fact that it's the Sabbath day. And the Sabbath day actually begins Friday at sunset. So that's what it is right now. So the fact of that does have an effect on the content of the stream. I'm not going to be making a big deal looking at price charts and stuff like that this evening. It is now. Brian is here. He says, "Sup, Tim." Oh, Brian, it's good to see you, man. Thanks for stopping in. Life is well. That's what's up with me. I was just explaining in the past couple minutes about how active this week has been for me, but it's been good. And I've gotten some things done, that loose ends that I've been able to get tied up, which is good. Another thing I did this week is I did book my room for Vegas. Now, I did not buy a ticket for the event in Vegas next week, but I am going to be there Thursday. I'm leaving on Wednesday afternoon, and I'll get there probably sometime in the evening. So I'll be there Thursday all day. I don't know what the possibility is of running into people. I'll make announcements that I'm there and just see. I got a room at the Harrah's at the hotel where the event is. So maybe I'll just hang out in the lobby or something, or take a walk around the city for a little bit on Wednesday or on Thursday. And then I have to leave Friday, like early afternoon. I want to get back here by sunset on Friday. So hopefully I'll run into some people in Vegas. If not, there's some things that I would like to do just because I'm there. So it's not going to be a wasted trip one way or another. And but yeah, it's been a good week. And so now it's good for the weekend to be here also. Yesterday, I was doing some work with my friend Ryan, who is a plumber here in the area. And I consider him basically my best friend, at least here in Arizona. We met not long after I moved here and started working. And I dug a ditch for him, and one thing led to another. And after working on a couple of jobs with him, I told him about this thing that I'm looking forward to seeing launch called Bitcoin Hex. And he was like, "Oh, wow, that crypto stuff. I've been wanting to look into that for a while." And he's like, "If I give you some money, will you, put some in there?" And I'm like, "Sure." So my friend Ryan is a day one hex staker, just like me. And we've been like the best of friends ever since. And, we talk pretty regular, and just always shoot the breeze about different crypto stuff. And he's a pulse chain validator, and he's pretty big involvement in liquid loans. And it's just really awesome. But anyway, we were working together on two different jobs this week. And it was nice just to spend time with him and to catch up and stuff. So, it seems like, who dat? My name is Ryan. Well, that's good to know. I know a lot of people don't like to give their real names online, and I understand that. When I first got involved with social media platforms, I signed up on those things so people who know me can find me. So I always used my real name, and I never thought that I needed to change that when crypto came along. So I just used my real name. And my real name is Toxic. That's good to know, Mr. Hexhog. Like it up, folks. Oh, man. Oh, I'm glad you guys are here. Um, I'll be honest, I really didn't prepare a whole lot of like material to present tonight because it is the beginning of the Sabbath, and to me this is more of a time to just relax and reflect and just enjoy life and enjoy the presence of the people that you care about. And I care about you guys. I care about everybody in Hex. I want to see everybody do well and succeed. And that's part of why what I talk about a lot revolves around the successful society. Um, that's that's what I want to help create and just help people acquire the things that they want to do in life. And um, fortunately, now that things are starting to pick up a little bit, I don't see as much people taking shots at each other like we have seen in the past month or two. And I realize that a lot of people who do that are just, giving each other a hard time. They really don't hate each other that much. Um, but anyway, it's it's good. Let's see who that just posted something here. Watch that It's Cool Inspiring 1 minute clip from Crypto Kloss. I'll have to look that up. I'm not aware of that clip. Um, hey, Corey's here. Hi, Tim. I'm up in Flagstaff right now. Oh, cool. I hope you're enjoying Flagstaff. I've been there several times myself. I went to a place called the Orpheum Theater a couple years ago for a multi-band concert that was celebrating the birthday of Jerry Garcia. Great venue, great time. Flagstaff is a great college town. It's just a really neat place to go to. And the only thing about Flagstaff is you don't want to go there in the winter unless you're spending a couple days there and you're skiing because they can get some pretty nasty snow. And if you're not careful, you can literally get like trapped in that city because it's like the only way out of there is I-40 and I-17. And man, when it snows really hard, those interstates get shut down and you're trapped. So, probably not dealing with that now. It's probably just a little cold. But that's cool that you're in Flagstaff, man. It's a great place. So, yeah, it is Friday night. I don't know how long I'm going to stay on tonight because I really don't want this stream to interfere with RG3 stream. But at the same time, if we get a lot of conversation going and things start taking off, then I'll just stay on as late as I feel like. Good evening, Hexicans. Yeah, we are here for the snow. There isn't much snow right now, though. Well, there can be. Like I said, it seems like the last 4 times I drove through Flagstaff, it was pretty nasty and just sit in traffic for an hour or longer. It's, yeah, Arizona does get snow if you go to the right place. It's, if you could look at the state of Arizona from like a cutaway, a side view, it's like you have Phoenix down here at like 1,500-foot elevation, and you take I-17 and you literally just go uphill like the whole rest of the state until you get to the part where I'm at. Where I live is called the Verde Valley. That includes a couple of large towns. They're not really cities. They're like really big towns that are in this little divot in the middle of the state. And then you just start going uphill again until you get to Flagstaff. But I mean, it's literally just Man, I don't know how the truckers do it sometimes coming down from Flagstaff into Phoenix. There are several of these emergency pull-off ramps in case their braking systems go out because it's so steep going downhill. The elevation is that extreme in this state. But that provides for a lot of scenery. It's like you can experience it's like we have almost every single type of climate and environment in this state except for the ocean. We don't have any waterfront property. However, if you cross over the border into Mexico and you drive south for about a half hour, you can go to a place called Rocky Point, and that's on the Pacific Ocean. It's shorter to go there than it is to drive to California to go to like the ocean in San Diego, for example. So, um, yeah, Arizona rules. I love it here. And, you know, the fact that I'm building a house on top of a mountain is kind of cool too. So, um, but yeah, it's a great day. It's great to share the Sabbath with you people. When I first started observing this, it was like the highlight of the week because it was a new experience to me. And it always as time went on, it kind of lost some of its specialness and it started to turn into a routine. But just because of things that have happened to me in recent years, that sense of specialness has come back with it. And I just love sharing that with people and wanting to experience it with people and wanting them to receive the blessing that comes from recognizing that. And I talked about last Sabbath afternoon, about I was continuing to share with people my personal experience that was bringing me to this place of knowledge. And I left off talking about this job I got in 1998 working for a telecommunications company. And that's when I first got access to the internet, which was a really, awesome time at that point. Um, the internet was a real breakthrough because when I was a teenager, I've talked about this before. I had a couple of Commodore computers and I had my own phone line, which was unheard of for a teenager in the 80s. Most kids I knew had to like ask permission from their parents just to use the telephone in their house. And not only did I have free course to use the family phone, I had my own phone line. So I ran a bulletin board system at the age of 15 on a Commodore computer. And this was the precursor of the internet. Except with a bulletin board, you didn't have a central server that can serve multiple users at one time. A bulletin board was basically when you used your computer to make a phone call to call somebody else's computer. And like with a regular landline, you can only have one person accessing the number at one time. Everybody else would get a busy signal. So I was really into this as a teenager. I mean, this was just a real breakthrough for me. So, as I shared before, when I moved to Arizona the first time in 1992, I got rid of all my computer equipment and just got out of computers altogether because I was taking more of an interest in the music industry, wanting to learn how to play guitar, wanting to be in a band and do stuff in that field. And so I was out of the whole computer scene from 1992 until late 1995 when I moved back to Pennsylvania. And by this time, the internet was starting to emerge, and I didn't get access to the internet until 1998. And as I shared last week, that was a big deal to me because I started looking at material that basically following leads to different websites that I had acquired from listening to this man who produced a series of videotapes regarding the subject of creation, evolution, the role of science, and just the history of different scientists and uh, their research and their perspective and where they fit in relationship to all of this. And it was while I was looking at these different websites on the internet that I encountered information that basically pulled the plug on what was my eschatological understanding at that time. Eschatology is the study of Bible prophecy and how it's interpreted to uh, relate to the future, basically. And the most popular perspective out there is this thing that is called the rapture, that is followed by this 7-year tribulation period that precedes the second coming of Christ. And I read myself into a belief of that when I lived in Arizona. And suddenly I encounter information on the internet that revealed that the mathematics behind the interpretation of the time prophecy that is used as the foundation for that entire perspective was wrong. The math was wrong. And, people can argue, you know, interpretation of texts, but it's kind of hard to argue, you know, about whether or not 1 + 1 = 2 or not. It's kind of cut and dry. So when I saw that, that left me wondering, okay, what does life look like from this point forward as far as my relationship to the unfolding of future events and how that plays in with my whole relationship with God and with faith and all. So that is what prompted me to read this book called The Great Controversy again for a second time. And um, that is what introduced me to the Sabbath and the fact that the Sabbath day, growing up, I just assumed that the Sabbath day was Sunday because that's the day that our family went to church and it was just customary for us. And I never really gave it any thought until, I was a teenager and I was interested in a band called Black Sabbath. Not so much because of their music. I mean, there were some of their songs that were cool, but it was because of the title of their band that kind of triggered my curiosity. And I remember asking my grandmom about that, and she was like, "Yeah, the Sabbath is Sunday," and I just left it at that. And come to find out later, that's not correct. Um, the notion of Sabbath being Sunday is actually uh, the result of the Roman Catholic Church assuming the authority to change the Sabbath day from Friday sunset until Saturday sunset, on making it Sunday based on the resurrection of Jesus and the observation of Easter. And it's very interesting in that regard that the fact that Jesus was crucified on a Sunday is actually a relative statement. It's a relative point. The real significance of the crucifixion at all was that it actually served as the fulfillment of uh, what was called the spring feasts in the uh, Hebrew economy consisted of Passover, the wave sheaf, the Feast of Weeks, and Pentecost. And you know, Jesus was crucified on Passover, or actually just before Passover, and his resurrection was on the day of what is known as the wave sheaf, which was 2 days after Passover. And so the real significance of the crucifixion was to serve as the fulfillment of what this feast was meant to direct the minds of the people to, who were uh, had this as part of their culture, the Jewish people. So um, if Christians really wanted to, uh, commemorate the resurrection, they would do it in relationship to the Passover, meaning it would be 2 days after Passover. And if you look at the calendar, the Passover is on a different day of the week every year. And that's because of the difference between the Hebrew calendar and what we have as our calendar. So therefore, uh, the day of the resurrection would be a different day of the week every year also. Easter is always on a Sunday because the object of Easter is Sunday. In the Roman Empire, in the days before Jesus ever even came upon the scene of history, um, Easter was always connected with the worship of the sun. The sun was basically deified and uh, personified and was regarded as an object of worship because it was basically the source of life. It made plants grow, it made animals grow, it helps the humans to grow, and it was also Easter was also associated with fertility, prosperity, making babies, offspring. That's why the symbol of Easter is a rabbit. It's also why the symbol of Playboy magazine is a rabbit. If you've ever taken a walk out in the wilderness and you stumble upon rabbits doing their thing, you would understand why. So, anyway, so these things started to become evident to me in by the end of 1998 is when this all started unfolding. And so the beginning of 1999, life started to change in that regard as I started observing the Sabbath. But another thing that happened to me in 1998 that was also very revealing was I was seeing this girl in Philadelphia. And I remember being at her house one evening, and I was just flipping through TV channels, and I came across it wasn't a regular public station, it was like a cable station or something, but there was a movie, it was more of a documentary about it was called The Rules of Engagement. And it was an expose on what happened with the Branch Davidians in Waco. And I remember sharing on one of my live streams about uh, going to church here in Arizona back in 1993. And just a few weeks after I started going, the first incident with the ATF and the people in Waco, when that happened, I heard about that right away. And, I talked about how that was an odd curiosity to me about, what's going on here. So um, I never really got the full scoop apart from what the media reported until I saw this movie called The Rules of Engagement. And that really hit me pretty hard because I had this certain perception of the United States and the United States government. And this movie really like shattered that illusion bad. And it really affected like how I relate to the whole world ever since. And uh, quite frankly, it just was disgusting to me to see just the dishonesty behind all of that and what happened, regardless of what you think about those people or what they believed or what people think about David Koresh or whatever. Um, how the United States government related to that was just really horrible. And there is a man that I know who um, has, I've seen him appear in the comments on the live stream. He served 21 years in the United States Army, and he was there at Waco while he was in the Army, and he gave me his side of the story. And wow, that it basically went along with what was being talked about in this movie. So that was a big wake up call to me. And between that and understanding my family history and what my family was subjected to in France, and now reading this book, The Great Controversy, which has several chapters on the Protestant Reformation, uh, and knowing what Protestants endured during that time. And now, with me becoming a Sabbath keeper and basically pursuing a lifestyle in relationship to that, that started to separate me from other people. I started to see that, life is going to start getting real for me. Like I'm going to start facing some very real confrontation because of just living according to the dictates of my conscience and being true to what is true. I mean, even my grandmother, who taught me about my family history, was kind of taken back when I told her about, I'm observing the Sabbath now and I'm going to a church that meets on the Sabbath day. And part of that also involves the food that I eat and things of that nature. And, even she thought I was going a little off the deep end there. And, but, life was a blessing for me. So it's just what happened. So I joined a Sabbath keeping church in 1999. I'm back in Pennsylvania still at this time. And of course, the girl that I was seeing, whose houses that I was at watching this movie called The Rules of Engagement, we met through a church. So we had some things in common that we believed. And now all of a sudden, the things that I had believed previously, I realize are not true. And I knew she was not going to accept this very well. Like I knew she was going to freak out because a lot of people who call themselves Christians, their Christianity is revolving around a narrative not around conviction of what is true. And I can tell based on her behavior that she was one of these types of people. She was living according to a Christian narrative. And I knew that if I pull the plug on her narrative, that is, she's going to go into massive defensive strategy. And this is not going to look good. So to try and arrange matters in my favor, I thought, well, when I break this news to her, maybe it would be best that I do it in a public place because she would possibly be more reserved and consider her ways before just freaking out. Boy, was I wrong. I took her to a restaurant in her neighborhood. Unfortunately, when we were there to eat, it's like we were like one of like maybe 3 tables in the entire dining room that had like people sitting at them. So it's like we practically had the place to ourselves. And so I laid out to her what was happening with me. And like I said, it didn't go over well at all. Uh, like she literally started crying and like panicking, and she's like, frantically like flipping through her Bible, trying to find like proof text to counter what I'm telling her. And I'm like telling her, like, this is where you want to look for your proof text. I'm like, literally, let me help you find your proof texts for you so you can use them against me, because evidently I don't know what I'm talking about. And yeah, that didn't help either. So needless to say, we only had like 1 or 2 phone conversations after that, and it was obvious that, we had come to an impasse and it was over. So that was just one more thing I had to sacrifice in order to stay true. So the notion of sacrifice is not new to me. So when the prospect of engaging in the sacrifice in pulse chain and pulse sex was presented to me, it wasn't, to me, that wasn't a sacrifice at all. So anyway, 1999, I get involved in this Sabbath keeping church. And at first, it's really just great. It was like, I felt like I found my home. And the first day I go there, they have like a Bible study class before they have their morning service. They actually have a couple different classes depending on how many people are there. And the man who is leading out in this study class, him and his wife, he was a retired pastor, and his wife seemed very fond of me because she later confided in me that I reminded her a lot of her son who had taken his life previously. So she felt a certain affinity with me. And her husband also was rather receptive of me also, because of the fact that I was just someone who was responding in his class. A lot of times when you go to a church and there's like a Bible study class, most people just kind of sit there and don't say much. And I say a lot, or at least I respond to everything that is presented. So this couple kind of took me in a sense. They would invite me to their house on Friday evening for dinner, and we would spend time together. And was very well. And at one point, um, this lady offered to help me out financially, which was another thing. And I didn't even say anything to her about my financial status at the time. She just approached me one day and asked me how I was doing money wise. And I told her, and she was like, "Well, do you have any debt?" And I'm like, "I've got some, yeah, but I can pay it." And she was like, "Well, do you have any credit card debt?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do, as a matter of fact." And she was like, "Well, my first husband was a doctor. And when he passed away, he left me a stack of money. And from time to time, I offer to help people with that money." And she's like, uh, "I believe that you are one of the 144,000, which is a group of people mentioned in the book of Revelation." And she's like, "I want to help you." She's like, "I'll make you a deal." She's like, "You come over to my house, you call the banks, cancel your credit cards, cut them up. I'll cut you a check for each one of them, and you can just pay me back whenever you're able to." And I was like, "Really?" She's like, "Yeah." So I took her up on her offer. And that was another thing that really uh, helped me get established just as a person. And I did pay her back. Um, so um, there's a lot that happened during the time of being uh, involved in this particular church. They just had a lot going on because of, they also had a lot of conflict going on because of just the way their whole uh, denomination is structured. And I ended up walking into the middle of a conflict that I was not aware was going on until I was. And um, a lot of this conflict revolves around a subject that they refer to as righteousness by faith. And basically, what that is just what defines a Christian for real. And, um, this subject matter was not something that really uh, I looked into that much, because that was never really a question in my mind as far as how I related to God and stuff. I didn't have any question about that. I didn't have an issue with, assurance or security or anything like that. But apparently a lot of people do. And it wasn't until January of the year 2000 that somebody gave me a series of tapes that were recordings of a talk by a man who was a former university professor who taught classes on this subject. And he was speaking at a college in Virginia at a public event called a convocation, which is basically, it was just a series of meetings that were open to the public that were held on the campus of this college. And the subject matter in these tapes I found very, very intriguing. And suddenly, for the first time in my life, I actually entertained the thought of actually becoming a pastor. And this was something that people had been encouraging me to pursue ever since I started going back to church in 1993. And I was always reluctant to even consider that, because I looked at it this way, that um, if God needs me to be a pastor, then the kingdom of heavens is in pretty sad shape. Like, you can't find people that are more qualified to do this job than me. Like, how bad are things that you actually need me? And that was my whole approach to the whole vocation, until I heard these tapes in the year 2000. And suddenly I'm reconsidering the prospect, because the whole subject of what sin is started to become more concrete to me. I started to be able to relate to what this subject actually is, in a way that I could talk about it from in a public platform, in a public place. Before, to me, I didn't know. To me, it was just something that was bad. That's all I knew about it, and that was about the extent of it. But now the light started to turn on, as it were, and I started to study into this subject a little bit more. And of course, I was talking to people about all of this, and people are listening to what I'm having to say about it. And that started to open up doors for me to speak, before the congregation. And it just so happened that the pastor of this church at the time, he actually pastored two different churches in the local area. And I had ended up becoming affiliated with both of them over time. But what happened is, his father, who lived in like Vermont or somewhere else in the New England area, was sick, and he was basically dying. So our pastor was making frequent trips out of state. So he was contacting me on a fairly regular basis and asking me if I could fill in for him at both of his churches. And I started doing that. And the more I started speaking, the more it became evident that not everybody was okay with the things that I was saying. And the reason for that, I learned the hard way, and I didn't see it clearly at first. At first, it was actually very perplexing to share with Christians things that are biblical truths, and experiencing resistance from people. This was bizarre to me. This was like something out of the Twilight Zone. But I realized the reason I was experiencing this was because I was speaking to people who had unresolved guilt in their life. And a lot of people, the reason they go to their favorite church is because they're hearing things that make them feel validated. They like to hear what the Bible says as smooth things. They have itching ears. They want, they go to listen to somebody tell them what great people they are. People like to be flattered. And I'm not very good at flattering people. Actually, I really suck at it. I'm too straightforward with people. And I learned the hard way that you're not going to get very far as a pastor being that type of person. And, when you are an ordained minister in this church, which I wasn't, I was just somebody filling in for somebody who was. When you are getting paid to be a pastor, the person who's writing your paycheck has a tool of leverage over you. They have a way of telling you what you can and cannot say. I was starting to have my eyes opened to the corporate nature of this church. And again, this was a shock to my system because the church that I had belonged to previously, the Independent Baptist Church that I was associated with, there was no power structure. The pastor was the guy whose name was on the deed for the property. The whole thing was his baby. What he said goes. You know, all the deacons and the other people in the church, they were all just his yes men. You know, he was the man. But now in this Sabbath keeping church, which is a denominational hierarchy, basically, that is operating all over the world, it was a totally different environment, and it was a lot more political. And I was not prepared for this. And, you know, there's people encouraging me, oh, you should go to one of the church's, you know, colleges and, you know, become a pastor and stuff. And now I'm like, no, I'm not going to get in the middle of this. There's something wrong here. Tin Top has stopped in. He's like, what's up, Hexicans? Hello, Tin Top. Welcome to the show. Glad that you can stop in. Glad to see you. It's been a great week for me. It's been a great live stream so far. Just been sharing with everybody more of what has happened to me since getting involved. Since getting back involved in churches. So I've basically just been sharing some more of my personal experience, seeing that it is a Sabbath day. So I've just been sharing some more of that with everyone. Basically, I'm up to the year 2000, and I'm talking about having my eyes opened to the corporate nature of denominational churches and the fact that I was involved in one at this time. And like I said, people were encouraging me to go to college, go to a university, and getting the types of credentials to become an ordained pastor. And I'm like, no. I'm not doing this. But it's kind of funny. A girl that was going to this church told me, she's like, well, you know, if you do go to one of our universities, there's a good chance that you're going to find a girl there that will marry you. And suddenly I'm like, well, maybe. I'm like, wait a minute. People who go to college, they're like 10 years younger than me. I'm like, that's weird. I'm like, that's not going to work. She's like, no, at our universities, there's people of all ages that are there because people join the church at different ages, different stages in their life. So, you know, our university system has people of all ages. You'll meet all kinds of people there. So suddenly I'm willing to, because I was not married at this time. Of course, I haven't been married at any time. But at this time in my life, I was really wanting to get on with it. It's like I'm 29, almost 30 years old. And it's like I really need to get on with this. So again, I'm willing to reconsider. But then at the same time, it started to become evident that the people who were in opposition to the things that I was preaching about were the people that were more supportive of the denominationals university system, and the people that were receptive of the things that I was preaching about were telling me that the church also has colleges that are not part of the corporate structure, that there's actually colleges that are self-supporting. They're actually supported by people like private donors. And granted, these schools are not accredited, but at the same time, by going to one of these schools, you will have more doors open for you to engage in what is called self-supporting work. And I just happen to know the brother of somebody who was involved in one of these self-supporting schools, these self-supporting colleges, and he was a very wealthy man. And, the whole self-supporting work was no joke if you knew how to manage a business. So now I'm like, oh, I'm more drawn to this, because basically what these schools teach you is they teach you how to be a business owner, essentially. And so I started to look into one of these self-supporting schools, and this was by the fall of 2001. And after visiting one of these schools, I was pretty much committed to the prospect of going to one, this one in Virginia in particular. And so I get back, I went to visit the school for about a week just to spend time on the campus and, become acquainted with some of the students and teachers and stuff, and the staff and things. When I got back, it's like, okay, I'm going to put my house, which I was in the process of buying from my aunt. It's basically a double wide modular home. It wasn't a conventional house, but it was in good shape. But I put it up for sale, and I was going to sell this house to raise the money to pay for the tuition to go to the school. The challenge I found with trying to sell this house is that the date of manufacture just missed the qualification to sell it under the Housing and Urban Development Program. Tin Top kills me. I'll bring this up. He's like, Christian colleges are full of girls looking for a husband. They are still a good spot to get a good girl or a naughty one. They're there too. Don't get me started on that one. That's a whole other subject. I will get into it eventually, but I've already been streaming for almost an hour tonight, and I'm not going to get into the whole experience with girls in Christianity. I don't want to open that can of worms. I want to, but not tonight, because I don't want to go off on a tangent after I've already been streaming for an hour, but I will eventually. It's like, send pics. Well, actually, I could send you a few pics, but they wouldn't be very enticing, and you'd probably just be like, so what? If I sent you any pics at all, that they wouldn't be very, they wouldn't be who that's like one proof of girls. Oh man. I got to tell you, the only proof of girls I could send you are the ones who told me to get lost. Uh, I learned the hard way. Just because a girl goes to church doesn't mean she's not going to hate your guts. Um, like I said, it's a jungle out there. The things that you think ought to be, you find out they're not what you thought they should be. And sometimes you have to learn that through some pretty hard, humiliating experiences. Oh man. Oh, but what I will tell you, I'm going to bring this to an end pretty soon. But anyway, as I was saying, I found out the hard way that the house that I was buying from my aunt just missed the qualification of being sold under some program involving the housing and urban development. And as a result, anybody that was interested in buying my house, they couldn't take a loan out for it because it was too old. It had to be a cash buyer. So that made it difficult because, first of all, who wants to buy a modular home that's like 20 some years old? It was like 25 years old at the time. It's like, who wants to buy that? And who has the cash to buy a modular home? Most of the people who live in modular homes are like people who are just getting by. They don't have, I think I was asking like $32,000 for it at the time. Most people where I lived didn't have $32,000 in cash. And if they borrowed it, they wouldn't be allowed to use that for the home because it didn't qualify under HUD. And most people didn't have the kind of credit to get a $32,000 cash loan. So I was finding this out the hard way, and it just got really frustrating. Like, I think like 6 months went by and I couldn't sell my house. So I'll stop here. Hudat says, I think Sandy Beach might nice one to talk to. Sandy and I get along very well. Sandy and I have talked about meeting each other in Vegas. So the last time we talked about that, she had a surgery that came up, and that window, when I was going to be there, she couldn't make it because she had a surgery scheduled. And I think that surgery got canceled right before then, but now it's rescheduled during this time of the Pulse Chain conference, because the last time I talked to her, she's not going to be in Vegas for this conference. So, but Sandy and I get along very well. And I would like to meet her. We have a lot in common. I'm not going to get my hopes up. She has sent me pictures of herself, trusting me not to dox them because she's very shy, and, her pictures that she shows are not very revealing. But she's sent me, I know what her face looks like, basically. And I know what her voice sounds like. And she actually has a really attractive voice. I did let her know that. I'm weird like that. The things that I are most attracted to in a woman are her eyes and the sound of her voice. Everything else is relative. Everything else can be edited. I look at it this way. If you live a healthy life, you will become attractive, period. You don't need boob jobs. You don't need fad diets. You don't need, Botox. You don't need any of that crap. If you just take care of yourself, you'll become attractive naturally. So a lot of the physical features don't matter to me. That's why I'm interested in eyes and voice. I'm weird. What can I say? Tintop says, I'm sorry to jump in your stream all loud. I've got a soft spot in my heart for girls in short black skirts and long white socks. We'll both try and stay focused. Okay. Oh, man, you guys are great. Man. I don't even know what I want to say in comment to that. Um, yeah, you just need 51% to be on board with the edits, just like Bitcoin. Oh man. Cool beans. I love this cheap thrills. So anyway, yeah. I would like to meet Sandy. I think we would that things would go well between us. Even, I mean, really, the biggest challenge I think would be the fact that she lives on the East Coast and I live in Arizona, and I'm building a house in Arizona. So I'm not going to just drop everything and move out of Arizona. I'm at least going to finish building my house before I do anything serious, like involving somebody else. I mean, I met a girl at the Pulse Chain conference last year, and we, hit it off fairly well. And but she lives in another state, and she doesn't want to leave that state, and I don't want to leave Arizona. And so that's the real challenge at this point in life is, you know, meeting the right person. You're open to meeting anybody anywhere, but if you meet someone that you're interested in and they're halfway across the country, that makes it kind of tough. So anyway, interesting. I'm happy for you. I had a hunch about you and Sandy. Well, that's about it right now is a hunch. Like I said, we haven't actually met. We haven't talked about anything as far as like anything really personal interaction, like on a real personal level. Our conversations have just been general. And I mean, I've suggested us meeting up more than once, and she hasn't said, go away, you creep. So to me, that's still prospect. And like I said, if we do meet up, we'll just see where things go from there. But I'm not going to push the envelope. I'm not desperate. So we'll just see. But I will admit I am partial to blondes. I always have been. And I think it's because when I fell in love with that girl that I worked with, she was blonde. She just happened to be blonde. And it's like every woman I've been interested in ever since, it's like I've been trying to replace her. It's like that's the story of my life. I'm trying to replace the girl that I was in love with at one point with someone who reminds me of her. And so she had blonde hair. If she had red hair, then I'd probably be partial to redheads, but that's just how life worked. I am partial to KDP, LOL. KDP's a cool girl. I like her. She's got a really strong accent. And I don't mean that in a bad way. But she's got a really strong Australian drawl on that accent. It's kind of cute, but it's not, I wouldn't call that hot. It's not a turnoff. It's just a fact. But yeah, Katie's cool. She's smart. She's very smart, and that is very attractive about her is the fact that she's so intelligent. I like smart girls. I like girls that like to read. I like girls that are smart. Uh, I like girls who are smarter than me because I don't mean to brag, but I've been an avid reader my whole life, so I got a head full of knowledge. So, to meet somebody who has knowledge about anything is cool. And even if a person doesn't have a lot of knowledge, that's okay too. The problem is when you deal with people who don't know what they're talking about, but they think that they're right anyway because of how they feel about the subject. That's aggravating. It's like people's feelings are not the truth. And that was the thing that I had to bring out in this meeting that I was involved with earlier this week that I started this live stream out with is I was dealing with people who were trying to make a case about something based on their feelings and other people's feelings. And I'm like, feelings are nothing. I'm like, what are the facts in this matter? Why are you talking to me about this? Why am I involved in this meeting? What's the deal? If the deal doesn't go any further than how people feel, you're wasting my time. I don't care how people feel. You're not going to get me to make a decision or to agree with you on anything based entirely on feelings. So, anyway. So, yeah. Who that's like, I understand. That is true. So, oh, wow. I guess I'll wait until I made myself a smoothie for this stream earlier, and I still have some left. I was going to pour myself some and help myself to it, but I'll just wait. So, getting back to what I was sharing about my experience, I couldn't sell my house. And not only could I not sell my house, I couldn't find a buyer, basically, but tension started to build between me and various individuals in these two congregations surrounding the differences that we had about basically what it meant to be a believer and to be a Christian. And eventually, because I was a big internet junkie at this time, I was still, man, ever since I got on the internet in 1998, it's like I'd been an internet junkie from that point on. Like that was like that was like a food group to me. And because of that, through the people that belong to this church, they got hundreds of websites that are affiliated with them from one source or another. And it was through a website that was conducted by a man that was part of this self-supporting crowd that I was running with, that I became acquainted with somebody who lives in New Mexico, who had an experience that was similar to mine. And so we started talking and getting to know each other, and found out that there were other people in that area that were like me. So got to know some of more people that were acquainted with each other. And so it's like that started to become my new fellowship, my new congregation. And what happened is, over the course of time, this is now the summer of 2002, I went and visited them out in New Mexico. And we just hit it off so well that I decided I'm going to move back to the Southwest. This is a big enough reason for me to move back. I mean, ever since I moved out of Arizona in 1995, I was always open to the prospect of moving back to Arizona. And granted, this was New Mexico, but this was close enough. I mean, I like the Southwest, period. So any real reason to move back there, I would do it. So to me, this was reason enough. So I made a second visit in like September of 2002. And, after the second visit is when I was really like formulating a plan to move. The first time I visited, it's like, yeah, this is what I want to do. But I wasn't really on purpose about, putting together a plan to actually do it until I visited a second time. And then, yeah, I'm doing this. So when I got back, I started talking to everybody about, this is what I'm going to do. And of course, like it was the first time I moved out of Pennsylvania, most of the people who knew me didn't believe me. They thought you're just talking, because I talked about it all the time. And they're like, all you do is talk about it. You're not doing anything. But the fact was, I was doing something every day. I mean, the littlest thing that I could do that took me a step closer, I did. And if there was nothing I could do with my hands as far as like moving stuff around or packing stuff or making arrangements, then I'd pray about it. But it's like I did something every day. And the big step was getting out of the purchase agreement with my aunt and uncle with the house, because the house wasn't paid for and I couldn't sell it. So what I ended up doing is, my parents at that time were in a rental, and I offered to give my house to my parents if they would take over the payments to my aunt and uncle. The uncle being my dad's brother. So my parents took me up on that offer, because the rental they were living in wasn't really ideal. And so my aunt and uncle agreed to release me from the agreement that I had with them, and my parents took it over. So I was free to go. So after that point, it was all downhill from there. And again, it's like everything that I couldn't fit into a minivan that I bought, I either packed away, gave it away, threw it away, sold it. But basically, everything I owned from that point on fit in that minivan, and I moved to New Mexico. And I lived there for the next 9 years. And yes, New Mexico, the land of enchantment. New Mexico is fairly beautiful also. It's more spacious than Arizona. It's more flat. It's just, Arizona has more topography than New Mexico. But New Mexico is a cool place too. If you've ever been to like the area around Taos, that's probably one of the coolest places in the state that I'm aware of. Taos is kind of like the Sedona of New Mexico to me. And I lived a few hours away from Taos in a more remote area. And it was a really awesome time, because what I experienced living in New Mexico was what you could call self-knowledge. And basically coming to an understanding of the things that are, how we view it, and what has actually been done. What are the principles that are involved in restoring us to how things are, rather than living according to how we naturally view it? Because there's a lot more involved mechanically, like as far as how your brain works, how you think, how you respond to life. There's so much more involved than just all these Jesus narratives that people in Christian circles talk about. It's like life is a lot more real than a lot of people believe, because most people are they're just trying to make themselves comfortable. They're just trying to justify why they are the way they are, instead of taking an honest look at themselves and realizing how they got to be that way in the first place, and taking responsibility for who they are. This is the conflicts that I dealt with, and it was so relieving to be associated with people who understood this and didn't have all the baggage of guilt that so many other people carry, and not have to contend with all of that. It's like I was the one who was the new kid on the block, and I thought I had it going on. I realized, no, I actually had a lot of crap that I had to unlearn and just uh, be resolved of. So my time in New Mexico really did this for me. And it was really, like I said, it was a crash course in self knowledge, coming to a real understanding of who you are in relationship to who God is, and coming to a real understanding of how you've come to be who you are versus how you were meant to be originally. So, yeah, it's like I said, I lived there for 9 years, and the only reason um, I left for a few months in 2010 to go back to Pennsylvania to for a while, to try and take what I learned in New Mexico and apply it in a practical way among people in Pennsylvania. And that didn't really work out. So, and then of course, uh, there was another incident involving a girl that I'm not going to get into right now. The fact is, it didn't work out, so it doesn't involve getting into anyway. But the fact is, I ended up moving back to New Mexico in after being back in Pennsylvania for a few months, because it seems like all of the people that I had the closest relationship with were there. I felt like an alien being back in Pennsylvania. And but what happened is, uh, in um, the early part of 2012, I was given notice that my dad, his colon cancer had returned. And I knew at this point my dad's days were numbered unless he was willing to take some very drastic measures. And I wanted to be there for my dad just in case he had some kind of epiphany that would make him willing to take those drastic measures if it meant the difference between life and death. So, um, I've talked about before moving back to Pennsylvania in 2012, in November of 2011 is when I was introduced to the subject of Bitcoin. And of course, that was revolutionary, learning about crypto in 2000 in that time. Um, that played a big part too. But that didn't have anything to do with me uprooting my life and moving back to Pennsylvania. It was just one of those things that, uh, like learning about self knowledge, learning about crypto was just another revolutionary experience in my life that I took with me when I moved back to Pennsylvania. Tintop says, I like New Mexico, but not their politics. I like Arizona and Texas too, and some of their politics. I totally agree with you, Tintop. New Mexico is horrible unless you are a diehard liberal. I mean, like communist diehard liberal. When I visited Pennsylvania, I drove through New Mexico during the lockdowns. And man, it was like going behind the Iron Curtain when I drove through New Mexico. It was horrible. Um, yeah. Arizona and New Mexico are like two separate countries. And yeah, I like Arizona and Texas are probably two of my favorite states in the entire country. Texas, Arizona, and Florida are my three favorite states. Everything else is just, I mean, I don't have any complaints about any of the other states, but Texas, Arizona, and Florida are just the best. And yeah, I totally hear you. Hex Glenn stopped in here a moment ago. Hello, Mr. Hex Glenn. Thanks for stopping in this wonderful Friday evening. Been online for a little while. Probably going to wrap it up here soon. I don't know how much of this you've caught, but I'm glad you're here. Uh, it's good to see you again. And looks like the other guys are glad to see you also. But um, so yeah, I moved back to Pennsylvania in June of 2012. And like I said, my dad, his colon cancer had returned. And I wanted to be around my dad for the last couple years of his life. And the fact is, I was established enough in who I was as a person that moving out of New Mexico wasn't, tragic. It's like I was free to live wherever I wanted. So, um, so I didn't have any reservations about moving back to Pennsylvania. And but a lot happened after I moved back to Pennsylvania. A lot. Uh, and the fact is, I didn't live there very long. I mean, I was only there for a couple years. And not only was my dad on his way out, but my last living grandparent, my grandmother, she was starting to slow down. She wasn't sick, but she was 93 years old by this time. And you know, she was healthy enough to, like, she could walk, she could eat regularly, but my one aunt, her daughter, basically was taking care of her. Uh, so I wanted to spend time around my family, knowing that I could lose two of my family members at any moment. And I'm glad that I did that, looking back. My dad and I, um, our relationship was kind of strange in the sense that my dad pretty much let me get away with anything when I was younger. It's like when I was a little boy, it didn't take much for me to get my butt beat really bad. And my dad used to take these paddle ball paddles and he'd break the rubber ball off and give that to me. And that was my warning, knowing that the paddle was coming. And he would, like, break that paddle over my butt. I mean, and then he'd turn around, and he's the type of dad who would say, if you don't stop crying, I'm going to give you something to cry about. So it was like, some people would think that's extreme. And really, the only extreme part about it to me was that my brothers didn't get that same treatment. And I kind of felt that was a little unfair. But looking back on my life, I don't regret the fact that my dad beat my butt when I was a kid. Because when I was a teenager and I started driving, my dad pretty much let me do whatever I want. And at one point, like, when I didn't have my own car, my dad would let me use his car, and I'd go out and I'd go party till like 3 o'clock in the morning with my friends on the weekend. And my dad's only concern was, did you lock the door when you came home? That's it. The fact that I came home at 3 o'clock in the morning smelling like weed didn't, like, concern him at all. And like when I got pulled over by Jersey State cops on the way home from my first Dead concert, and I had to go back to Jersey and pay 3 traffic tickets, and one of them was an open container of booze. My dad didn't have any reservation about that. Uh, you know, he just he was like, whatever, just pay me back. So it's like my dad and I were best friends when I was a teenager. And but things started to change when uh, after I moved back from Arizona, and I was more of, you know, a man who was, like, uh, set on having a model of what success looked like. And uh, after I moved back to Pennsylvania, I was introduced to a business model that would allow me to create success that I took interest in. And my dad was not very supportive of that. So my dad and I started to grow apart as I started to enter into my mid 20s. Another thing was my dad always wanted me to join the Masons because my dad belonged to the Masonic Lodge. And it's like he was basically priming me for much of my life to become a Mason. And when I told him that I was not going to do that because I had acquired enough knowledge of the Masons to know that I didn't want to do that, that kind of created a little rift between us. Not too bad, but the fact that I just didn't go that route with my life just was a turnoff to him. So we kind of grew apart from that point on, and it seems like we grew apart more and more and more, even though we got along very well. By the time he got sick and I moved back to be with him, it's like he was like, "Yeah, I want to do all this stuff with you." I knew it was never going to happen. And unfortunately, I was right because my dad was just too much in love with the television. That's all he really wanted to do. And it's like the closest bonding I could do with my dad at that point was to just watch TV with him. We did end up becoming fans of a TV show, that we both got into. And that was kind of cool because the relationship dynamics that were being expressed in the TV among the characters in the show was a platform for my dad and I to talk about life and, be a little real with each other. So that helped. And that was good that we could talk. So let's see, a couple comments came up. Damn, bro, your dad sounds like a narcissist. No, I don't think so. I mean, not in a way that I would not use that word to describe my dad. I mean, there are things that I wish could have happened between my dad and I that I feel would have done more to cement our relationship and make something that was good enough for me even better. But yeah, I wouldn't regard my dad as a narcissist. Let's see. If you make it 93 trips, you don't need to do anything. Just hanging in there is that's on the day's docket. Yeah, really. Oh man. So eventually my dad did pass away in 2014. And what's interesting is his mother outlived him by 2 months. And I often wondered who would go first, my dad or my grandma, his mom. And it turns out he did go first. But there are some things that happened to me before my dad passed away. Between like when I first got back to Pennsylvania in the summer of 2012, something happened between then and the end of the year that was really the conclusion of everything that my whole experience in Christianity was meant to give me happened in the fall of 2012. That was basically the conclusion of that whole matter. And that's something that I'm not going to get into in detail now. I'll talk about that the next time I do a live stream on the Sabbath. I don't know if I'm going to be available to stream tomorrow because I was invited to have dinner with somebody in the afternoon. And after that, in the evening, after the Sabbath, I'm going to meet up with someone who wants to be onboarded into Pulse Chain. So depending on how long our meeting is, that's not going to be local. I'm going to be in another town. So I'm probably going to be occupied all day tomorrow. So I'm probably not going to be able to stream. But anyway, let's see. Another comment came up by Tin Top here. You missed your chance to capture and control societies. You could have helped fed us bugs and you could have gotten to the 33 Lodge. Yeah. You know, I suppose there's a lot I could say about that. Um, believe it or not, I've actually had somebody accuse me of belonging to the Illuminati at one time. During the time that I lived in New Mexico, one of the things I did out there for fun was I got way involved in internet discussion forums. Excuse me. These were the precursor to social media platforms. I'm old enough that I remember the day YouTube launched. I remember the day Twitter launched. I remember the day Facebook launched. And it's like I got involved in all these things. I'm just like an internet OG altogether. I don't mean to brag, but it's like I've been around. I've been alive. I was around before the internet was. So everything that's come out on the internet, I was there day one, whether I actually got involved in it or not. I was there. And before social media became the thing was internet discussion forums. And I got really big on a lot of them. I got kicked off of like a dozen Christian discussion forums for just talking about the truth. And I actually had somebody accuse me of belonging to the Illuminati at one time because of how I talked. And I thought I related to that as like one of the greatest accomplishments of my entire life. It's like, wow, I am the new world order. I have arrived. It's like I have reached the top of the heap. So, yeah, uh, it's amazing the things that I've read about. I actually have a folder on one of my hard drives that has just a whole catalog of books that are published by Masons, like Manly P. Hall. He has a couple of books that are in that library. Um, it's just it's a subject that I've looked into quite a bit because of my dad's involvement with it. And it's as a matter of fact, I really believe the only reason I graduated high school is because the fact that my dad was a Mason. Because by all intents and purposes, I should have had all Fs, just failed everything my senior year. One of my teachers was a Mason, and I knew I was supposed to get an F and just flunk out of high school. My dad had a talk with him because I saw my dad at the high school one day. And I wonder, what are you doing here? And, he didn't call me out and like, hey, son, how you doing? Because he knew that how much that would have embarrassed me. Uh, but when I saw him, I'm like, hey, how you doing? He's like, I'm doing good. How are you? I'm like, good. And we just kept walking. And he had a talk with one of my teachers. And next thing you know, instead of getting an F in his class, I got a D minus. And that was just enough for me to graduate high school. And I think my dad helped me get out of high school because my parents knew if I didn't graduate, I wasn't going to go back and repeat 12th grade to graduate. And I had told my parents that I'm doing everything I can to graduate because I knew my brothers weren't even going to come close. So I think I got a little bit of under the table help there. And good on dad for pulling that off for me because it really meant a lot to me to graduate because I knew it was going to mean a lot to my parents. So anyway, yeah, I suppose I missed my chance to be an official member of the Illuminati. But like I said, I've been accused of being part of the Illuminati. So that's good enough. They passed me in high school too because they didn't want to deal with me anymore. No Masonic handshake involved. They were just fed up. I think there may have been an element of that with me also. I think they kind of let me slide in them too. Because basically, you know, I was in high school. I graduated in '89. So if anybody's familiar with '80s movies, if you want to know who I was like in high school in the '80s, let me see if I can pull them up real quick. Uh, let me pull this up. Okay. Which one of these do I want to show with you people? Okay, which '80s character? Oh man, these are all too good. Uh, uh, all right, I'll pull up this one. No, wait. Uh, okay, I'll pull up this one. Uh, oh, it's a meme generator. Never mind. Give me a second here. Uh, oh man, I'm looking for a meme here that's worth sharing. That's okay. Let me share this on the screen. Tin Top says all of them. There's a couple that I specifically relate to. The Breakfast Club. There's a character in the Breakfast Club that I would have related to in junior high school, and that would have been Brian Johnson, the brainy kid. But in high school, things shifted. I kind of came out of my shell a little bit. And let me share my screen and I'll show you who I was more like in high school. Um, let's see. Here we go. Let me share the screen. I was definitely Jeff Spicoli in high school. The part in Fast Times when they're like, "Hey, was that the bellman? Oh wow!" The doors of the van break open and the cloud of smoke pours out. The guys just fall out of the van. Dude, that's exactly what I was like in high school. My senior year, I had this '67 Dodge van, and I used to drive around this neighborhood and I picked up kids at the bus stop that were basically my friends, and they would get on my van and I would take them to school. And we would just smoke on the way to school. It's like we would reenact that scene every day. Dude, that's what it was like. And yeah. So I think that's one of the reasons they let me graduate uh because they didn't want to deal with someone like that again the next year. I think between that and my dad helping me out. Yeah, my favorite part of the movie was him delivering pizza in class. Because of that movie, I actually convinced one of my teachers to let us order a pizza for lunch one day in class. I got away with that in junior high school. I talked to one of my teachers, and because we had payphones in the lobby of the school, and I called someone. I'm like, "Hey, can you guys deliver a pizza to the junior high school?" They're like, "Sure." They're like, "We'll deliver it to the lobby. We can't deliver it to the classroom." So I had a pizza delivered to the lobby, and I took it, and it was for the class. I didn't order it for me. I took up a collection. We ordered a pizza and we shared it together. But we wanted to reenact that scene from that movie in a way that we wouldn't, that I wouldn't get in trouble. And so, yeah. That movie was something else. Um, in a way, I was more like Rat in junior high school. The shy kid that you know wouldn't know what to do with a girl if she was handed to him on a silver platter. That's kind of what I was like in junior high school. Um, I was still a little more reserved in high school. I think my whole Jeff Spicoli thing was kind of a way of covering that up. Um, but I wasn't as bad as I was in junior high school. But anyway, that's my life when I was younger. So I think I'm going to call it for tonight. It is getting a little late. Well, no, actually, it's not even 9 o'clock here. What am I saying? Late, please. Even if it is, even if I'm tired, I don't fall asleep before 11 o'clock anyway. But there's things that I like to do as a way of winding down to get ready to go to sleep. Um, Classic. All I need are some cool waves. Cool. How did that go? You're saying all I need is some gnarly waves, sticky buds, and hot babes. It was like all I need is some tasty waves, cool buds, and I'm fine. That was his response to Hamilton when he's like, "You need to get a job, Spicoli." Yeah, that was one of the closing scenes when he goes to the bathroom. He's like, "Hey man, no towels." That was the diversion so he can throw the coffee on the guy, on the robber's face, and he saves the day. And Spicoli's like, "Awesome, totally awesome. Way to go, Hamilton." Oh, wow. I've seen some of those movies so many times, I have them partially memorized. Who that's like Ferris Bueller's Day Off. You know, that was one 80s movie that I actually didn't like. I didn't like the character of Ferris Bueller. I felt like he needed to get beat up. Um, I think the reason I felt that way is because I identified with Cameron more than I did with Ferris, and I didn't like that fact. Uh, I didn't like having to face that. So anyway, yeah, Tin Top says, let's call it. We can raid the captain. Yeah, there's a good idea. Let's call it and let's raid the captain. I'm going to end this stream. So everybody, you all have a good night. Let's go over to Discourse Syndicate and enjoy our time over there. So thank you everyone for joining me. You all have a great night. We'll talk soon. See ya next time I'm on. Until then, bye.